he co-authored, I think, pretty much a foundational textbook with Herman Daly, was mentioned before, called Ecological Economics. He's a professor of community development and applied economics at the University of Vermont. Please welcome Joshua Farley.
So I want to talk about how we redesign our economic system to confront the new challenges of an ecosystem that has become dominated by human activities, in which our activities are threatening to destroy the life-sustaining functions of our global ecosystems. And I want to start right from the laws of physics, because I think we need to base our economics in physical laws. And it's a basic law of physics. You can't make something from nothing. So everything our economic system produces is really the transformation of raw materials provided by nature. It's the only source of something available. Another law of physics is you can't do work without energy. And 86% of our energy right now is fossil fuels. Another law of physics is you can't make nothing from something. When we burn those fossil fuels to transform those raw materials into something of economic service, the waste from our burning fossil fuels returns to the ecosystem. The waste from our economic activities, everything we produce breaks down, wears out, falls apart, returns to nature, is waste. And these are laws of physics. The economic system transforms raw materials into economic products and back to the ecosystem as waste. If we then look at the laws of ecology, those raw materials we transform into economic products alternatively serve as the structural building blocks of our ecosystems. You remove the structure, you lose the function. Those functions include life support functions, include the capacity to sustain humans and all other species. And when we further return waste, we degrade those life support functions, we degrade the ecological function further. So we have now entered a new geological epoch, you could argue, that the rate at which, especially with the use of fossil fuels, the rate at which we extract raw materials and return waste dramatically exceeds the capacity of our planet to sustain it. I forget who actually talked about these planetary boundaries. Maybe it was Randy Hayes, where we have exceeded, there's these boundaries, these thresholds, that if we pass them, we're going to have catastrophic impacts on our ecosystem. The scariest part about this, perhaps, is that most of those thresholds, as Randy talked about, it's nitrogen, phosphorus, biodiversity loss, climate change, fresh water use. Most of these thresholds are related to agriculture, the production of something absolutely essential that we can't live without. So we have this problem that we are surpassing planetary boundaries on one side. On the other side, we're not meeting the basic needs of people. We have 1 billion people who don't get enough to eat every day. So we have planetary boundaries that we can't go beyond, but there's social boundaries that have to be met. And somewhere in that area of meeting basic needs without exceeding planetary boundaries is where our new economic system has to be. So we've reached all the problems we have because of an economic system driven by this need for incessant, endless growth. And that has led us to the point, so our driving force has been to grow the economy ever larger and to maximize monetary value. We need a new set of economic goals for a finite planet, for the Anthropocene. So one goal, we have to avoid irreversible collapse of global ecosystems. That's a mandatory goal for any economic system. And the other goal, we have to satisfy people's basic needs. We have to meet the basic necessities for food, water, energy, shelter. So the fundamental goal of our economy should not be to maximize monetary value, but to meet these basic needs. The question is, can capitalism achieve these goals, or do we need a fundamental reform? To begin with, capitalism, you can take a look at any textbook in neoclassical, introductory economics. They tell you there's no difference between wants and needs. All an economy can do, we can't objectively say whether my wants for something are, I get more satisfaction from something than you. And they actually say that the goal of an economy, each of us decides what we want. The goal of an economy is to satisfy subjective preferences. I know what I want better than you do, so I make my choice about what I'm going to do to satisfy those wants. What the economists fail to say is the market doesn't satisfy subjective preferences, it's preferences weighted by purchasing power. My preferences don't matter at all if I don't have the purchasing power to back them up. So we really can we can compare wants and needs. If there's a physiological necessity that is not being fulfilled, I have a need, and that trumps wants, and that's what we really have to focus on. So, we really need to we have to pay very close attention to meeting basic needs, and that's what has to define an efficient economy. Economists say, whenever you ask about, well, what should we do? They say markets are efficient. The selling, what sells markets is they're efficient. And we want to know, what does it mean? Everybody supports efficiency, but what do economists mean by efficiency? So efficiency in a market economy is maximizing monetary value. And to maximize monetary value, you want to sell your products to the person willing to pay the most for them. And that's the willingness to pay is supposed to reflect the value the thing provides. So let's take a look how that functions in practice. So people before in this conference, I forget exactly who, have mentioned that there was a food crisis, 2007, 2008. And the price of corn and rice doubled, and the price of wheat tripled. So that's a huge price signal. So if we're gonna, and this is one thing that concerns me, is if we allow our, if agriculture really is the biggest threat to global ecosystems, and we internalize in a monetary sense our ecological costs into the price of food, we're gonna see the price of food skyrocket. And I would like to know, how many of you, in response to a tripling of the price of wheat in 2007, how many of you ate less bread? Any show of hands for who ate less bread? So pretty much zero. How is this? A massive price signal had no impact on how much bread you consume, but there was less wheat produced. That is why the price skyrocketed. Who consumed, what's that? You ate less meat, but we didn't eat less wheat, that's for sure. And but this is the problem of who did eat less wheat. If you look at the countries who consume over 3,500 calories per day, where the marginal utility of more food, the additional benefit is virtually zero, we had no decrease in our food consumption. You look at countries consuming less than 2,000 calories per day, where the marginal unit of food meets essential needs, keeps your kids from starving, allows them to develop, they saw their consumption of food decline dramatically. And that is because markets allocate resources according to willingness to pay, not according to needs or utility. And in my view, in a highly unequal world, markets allocate the important resources to those who get the least benefit from them. And I think that is a perfect example of what happened with food. The sad part about this is this was market efficiency, because it's far more efficient in a market sense to sell a loaf of bread to somebody who's willing to pay $2 from it, even though they're already overweight and will throw a third of it into the garbage, than it is to sell it to a destitute mother who can't afford to pay 50 cents for it because to keep her kids alive. It's inefficient to give it to the person who will pay less for it. The other irony of this is the price of wheat tripled in response to a small decrease in supply. When something is essential and there's no substitutes, we'll pay whatever it takes to get it. So a small decrease in the supply of an essential resource leads the price to skyrocket. So what happened to the contribution of wheat to GDP? A tiny decrease in supply leads to a tripling of the price. The contribution to GDP virtually tripled. Our economic system thinks it's wonderful when essential resources become short, because then your short supply, because then your GDP goes up, which is our goal. So what we need to do, though, this lecture has this conference has focused a lot on technologies, and I really do believe we need new technologies. And the new technologies, certainly that we need, I don't think we can feed 7 billion people with conventional agricultural production without wiping out biodiversity and fresh water and our oceanic ecosystems. So we desperately need new technologies in agriculture. And those technologies have to allow us to produce food while restoring ecosystem functions, while rebuilding what we've destroyed in the past. They've got to reduce our dependence on non-renewable resources. Our agriculture currently depends intensively on non-renewable resources, which means by definition it's unsustainable. And we need to produce food that's required to meet human needs, not transgenic corn and soy that's fed to animals. So another type of technology we need is new types of energy. So, and as Richard said, we need to consume a lot less energy, but what we do consume has to be cleaner and greener, and even wind power relies on these rare earths that are really bad for the environment to extract, and they have a lot of problems. We've got to improve our alternative energy. So what I want to ask is what type of economic institutions will create the right technologies, the one we actually need, and at the minimum cost. We want to spend as few resources as possible creating those technologies, and once they're created, we want to maximize their value. And I want to make the case that markets are systematically ill-designed to achieve any of these goals. So to begin with, we need to get the right information. We need to create the right technologies, those that will, help feed the poor and protect global ecosystems. Well, global ecosystems, as many people have pointed out, are not priced in a market economy. For one thing, I can't own climate stability. I can't own the ozone layer. I can't own flood protection. And if I can't own it, I can't put it on the market. I can't sell it. The market will not provide it, and you cannot make the market provide something that can't be owned. So markets won't protect the environment. The other thing is, the markets won't meet the needs of the poor. And they won't meet the needs of the poor because the poor can't pay. And to give a classic example of this, let's see where markets allocate resources. Aventis is a drug company, and some years back they developed this compound called eflornithine. And it turns out that this eflornithine killed trypanosomes, which cause African sleeping sickness. And there's 70 million Africans who are, susceptible to this disease, and it's debilitating, it's lethal, and it reduces your energy, it makes it very difficult to work. And, but Aventis looked and said, well, what is the market demand for this? 70 million Africans weighted by purchasing power of virtually nothing. There's no market demand. And they decided not to produce it for that. And Doctors Without Borders said, wait a minute, license it to us. We'll produce it. We'll make sure these people get it. And Aventis said, sorry, we can't do that. And the reason they couldn't do it is it turned out they'd already licensed the same compound to Bristol Myers Squibb and Gillette to make a product called Vanica. The same compound that kills African sleeping sickness also gets rid of unwanted facial hair in women. And so if you want to maximize the monetary value of a compound, preferences weighted by purchasing power, markets will allocate resources towards producing these cosmetics to meet the needs of, to meet the desires of wealthy women who have too much facial hair, and totally ignore the needs of the desperately poor. And that's the market working exactly like it is supposed to maximize monetary value. Another example, we desperately need new energy. Currently, the energy sector in the United States dedicates 0.3% of its sales to research and development, and that's even to develop new ways to, fracking and everything. We desperately need new energy technologies. The energy sector doesn't invest in it. I don't have time to explain why, but at the same time, Samsung invests 6% of its sales into research and development, 20 times more than the energy sector, to produce crap we really don't need. A new type of phone. And agriculture, we're not going to invest money in meeting the needs of the poor in agriculture. We need to invest in agroecosystems that actually protect ecological function, reduce consumption of non-renewable inputs, and you can't make money investing in that very easily. So markets are not producing the right information. Universities used to have that role. We used to be able to produce information for the public good, but now our deans of research tell us, you got to go where the money is. The money is with the corporations. You got to do research that meets the needs of the corporation so we can patent that. And it turns out that the majority of scientists state that patents, I'm trying to do research and there's a patent on some technique I want to use or on some knowledge, and I am not allowed to use that information. So a huge number of university scientists say that patents slow their research into what they want to do or force them to abandon a field altogether because they can't afford to pay for these patent rights. So markets are systematically producing the wrong information. They're trying to maximize profits. They produce the wrong foods, the wrong types of energy. So if we could figure out how to get markets to produce the right type of information, would they do so cost effectively? And here's the thing, a patent is a monopoly. It's a government-enforced monopoly. We are using taxpayer dollars to protect monopoly rights to information, and those monopoly rights prevent other scientists from using that information. So every time now there's a new medical technology, on average, it infringes upon 50 existing patents. And you can't bring that to market. You can't even do your research off it. If you take a look at golden rice, which somebody brought up the other day, this genetically engineered rice that contained vitamin A, that infringed upon over 70 patents. So the rate at which we develop new, the patents slow the rate at which we develop new knowledge. Another big thing is there's a concept in economics called a natural monopoly. If you have a very high fixed cost, you have to spend a lot of money to develop a new idea, but then circulating that idea is almost free. So this idea that the fixed cost is high, the marginal cost is low, when that happens, it's really stupid to replicate fixed costs. Yet the patent system, we have scientists racing to be the first to get a patent, so they're replicating these fixed costs, hiring separate teams of scientists to do the same research. Whoever gets there first wins. All the other research was for naught. It's kind of like replicating research would be like having 50 reservoirs and 50 water mains going into the city so you could choose from which tap you want water. That was wildly inefficient. So, it doesn't make sense for information production to be left to markets. Another thing is that information really does improve through use. Newton said, if I see farther, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. The main input into any new technology is existing information. And when we make it difficult to purchase that information, it slows the research. So once we have information, what do markets do with it? Markets ration access to information with a price mechanism. Yet information improves through use. And if you think about it, take a green technology. Let's say we develop some clean, efficient, decentralized, really non-polluting form of energy. Some private corporation develops that. They're going to slap a patent on it. They're going to sell it at such a high price that countries like India and China can't necessarily afford it and will continue to burn coal. The value of any kind of green technology or of information in general is maximized at a price of zero, when as many people who want to will adopt it. If you have a green technology, you want it to be free and readily available to all. And this reflects itself in, they've done studies on the rate of return of investments in research and development, public sector research and development for agriculture. And you find you get an 80% rate of return, because any farmer who wants can use that technology to improve their food production, and therefore the benefits are multiplied over all the farmers who use it. When Monsanto does research and development in food, they get a low single-digit rate of return because you can only use their technology if you pay for it. So it's very well established that markets are actually very poor for managing existing information. So if that's the case, what institutions are needed? And I would like to say, as Richard has pointed out, energy is at the core of any economy. So if we look at a fossil fuel economy, I can own oil, and if I want to burn oil, you can't. I burn it, you can't. We inherently compete for oil. So we have a competitive market system based on greed and self-interest. Alternative energy, however, solar energy, no matter how much solar energy China captures, it doesn't leave any less for us. What we need to capture solar energy is information, and if we develop a good technology and give it for free to China, their scientists will improve it. We'll get it back better than it was. It's a totally new paradigm of cooperation, not competition. So what we want is cooperative investment in information, and then no ownership. It's free for anybody who wants to use. So that's the type of institution we need. The question is, are we capable of cooperation and reciprocity? And economists tell us no, we can't. We're inherently selfish and self-interested, and we don't cooperate. There's amazing new ideas coming out in evolution, what's called group selection. And that humans, these bands of hunter-gatherers, and in many other species as well as humans, but the band of hunter-gatherers that had the most cooperative individuals outcompeted the other bands and would therefore reproduce more and more. So between bands, the most cooperative unit outcompetes the others, and it's evolutionary pressures selecting for that cooperation. Within the band, the cheater and defector might do better. So what we actually have is dual selective forces, one favoring cooperation, one favoring competition and selfishness. But we can create economic institutions that will lead selfish individuals to behave cooperatively, or cooperative individuals to behave selfishly. And these are very well documented. I don't really have that much time in my last 30 seconds, but what I do want to point out is there's abundant evidence that shows that markets and thinking in terms of money and monetary transactions leads people to behave selfishly. Simply triggering people to think of money makes them less likely to offer help to others, less likely to ask for help, more eager to engage in solitary activities versus shared ones. And that economists, lo and behold, are doing one course in economics will make people more selfish, less cooperative, more likely to free ride on others, and more likely to be corrupt and cheat. So we've developed an economic system that stimulates exactly the wrong type of behavior and makes economists be the wrong type of people to be telling us what to do.